Parrot just lost the civil war, or at least that's what everyone thinks, because there are a few ways Parrot could take back his kingdom. This is Ashswag, the leader of the Invisible Mafia, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the course of the civil war. But to fully understand Ashswag's role in the civil war, we have to go back to the Invisible Mafia arc. The Invisible Mafia was defeated in Season 1. Spoke destroyed all the stasis chambers, Parrot sent the beacon signal, all Mafia members drank milk and ended their invisibility, but the Mafia never actually died. Here's why. The tomb of the Mafia still exists in the far-end dimension. Inside that tomb are all resources from the server, stasis chambers for every former Mafia member, and a fail-safe mechanism where if any resources are taken from the tomb, all former Mafia members are killed. This means the Mafia technically still exists despite its official defeat. And it's guarded by Marlow, who's ranked number 1 in the world on MC tiers, at least until he got exposed for being Safety Luigi. But anyways, keep this tomb in mind because it's the foundation of everything Ashswag is planning. Now let's talk about what Ashswag has been doing since the Mafia fell, because he didn't disappear, he's been actively building power in Season 2. Ashswag has a secret base with multiple layers of hidden rooms, a second secret tunnel leading to another secret base, a vault room with rare items, a villager room where villagers are extremely rare on the server, a dragon egg which is one of the rarest items possible, and a void room containing large amounts of unrenewable items. He's been making business deals where Redunes paid him hundreds of mending books for the villager and traded the dragon egg to Redunes. When Spoke raided Ashswag's entire base and found the Void Room, Ashswag caught him. This proves Ashswag is still operating, still building power, still making deals. And most importantly, he still has connections to every former Mafia member through the tomb. Remember this continued operation because it shows he never stopped seeking power. So why will Ashswag join the civil war? There are 4 reasons and they all point to the same inevitable conclusion. Reason 1 is the Mafia tomb is leverage. Hundreds of thousands of players were in the Invisible Mafia and many are still alive on the server. Every single one of them has a stasis chamber in the tomb. If anything is stolen from the tomb, they all die. This creates a permanent threat hanging over every former Mafia member, where they can't oppose whoever controls the tomb, can't raid it for resources, can't fight back against threats to activate it, they are permanently blackmailed. As the former Mafia leader, Ashswag knows where the tomb is, how to access it, who was in the Mafia, and how to weaponize the threat. He doesn't need to rebuild the Mafia, he just needs to remind former members that the tomb exists and he knows where they live. Reason 2 is Ashswag is power hungry. His core personality is described as power hungry, seeking to take over the server, controlling and needing to dominate others, egotistical, feeling superior to everyone, manipulative, using fear and deception and psychological warfare, and willing to do anything for power. When the Mafia was finally defeated, Ashswag revealed to Spoke and his friends something critical. I'm just a regular player who's seeking power but went too far. Every action we do, build a house or redstone contraption, is to seek power. This admission is everything. Ashswag admitted that everything is about power. He went too far with the Mafia, but that doesn't mean he stopped seeking power. It just means he learned to be more subtle. Reason 3 is the director connection. When Parrot confronted Ashswag after the Mafia failed to give him forgiveness, Ashswag said something shocking. He said a player known as the director was controlling him the entire time. Parrot didn't believe him and thought Ash was making excuses, but Ashswag was telling the truth. The director was Weefies, Parrot's best friend who faked his death and became the main villain of Season 1. Ashswag wasn't lying about being manipulated. If Ashswag was being manipulated by the director and the director is now dead because Parrot killed him with the Spyglass TNT trap, Ashswag is now free to operate without oversight. The director kept him in check. The director had a plan. Now that the director is gone, Ashswag can do whatever he wants. Reason 4 is perfect timing. The civil war creates chaos where Parrot's kingdom is starving, CinderCrest is marching on spawn, thousands are fighting and dying, leadership is distracted and security is weakest. This is the perfect time for Ashswag to make a move. Everyone is focused on the war, no one is watching for the Invisible Mafia's return. The server is divided between CinderCrest and Parrot. Neither side would see ashswag coming. Keep this in mind because it determines when the mafia returns. But before we continue, I want to ask you to subscribe because it's cool and you help me pay my bills. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not gonna force you to do it. So, how will ashswag join the war? There are 4 options and each one is terrifying in different ways. Option 1 is rebuild the invisible mafia, which is the obvious play. He recruits desperate players from both sides, offering them join me or starve in the war, uses the mafia tomb as leverage over former members and forces them back into invisibility. The structure would be the same as before, with ashswag as leader who's not invisible, diamond trim as elite fighters, gold trim as commanders, and iron, copper, and untrimmed as soldiers. The control system returns where everyone throws pearls into new stasis chambers. If you're seen visible, you die. If ashswag dies, everyone dies. And mutually assured destruction returns. While Parrot and CinderCrest destroy each other, ashswag builds a third faction in the shadows. When both sides are weakened, the mafia reveals itself and takes over everything. This works because thousands of players are desperate from starving and dying and losing. Former mafia members can be threatened with the tomb, and new players don't know about the history of the mafia, and invisibility is the perfect counter to both Parrot's strategy and CinderCrest's armies. Option 2 is sell the tomb, which is the strategic play. ashswag controls access to the mafia tomb, which contains all resources from the server accumulated during Season 1. Massive wealth in diamonds and netherite and enchanted items, and strategic advantage for whoever gets it. He approaches either Parrot or CinderCrest, saying, "I'll give you access to the tomb, every resource you need to win the war, in exchange for guaranteed immunity after the war, control of a major city or territory, free access to exploit however he wants, and protection from consequences." Both sides are desperate for resources, where Parrot's kingdom is starving and needs supplies, and CinderCrest needs gear for thousands of soldiers. Whoever gets the tomb wins the war. But here's the twist, ashswag sells to both sides simultaneously. He tells Parrot he'll give him the tomb, tells CinderCrest he'll give them the tomb, then activates the failsafe when both sides are inside, killing all former mafia members and destroying both armies in one move. Woo! How exciting! Oh my god, bro, I'm a grown-up man screaming over a Minecraft SMP. Option 3 is activate the tomb failsafe, which is the chaos play. The tomb's failsafe kills all former mafia members if anything is stolen. Hundreds of thousands of players were in the mafia and many are still alive. Some are probably in Parrot's forces or CinderCrest's forces. The strategy is identifying which faction has more former mafia members, waiting until they are in a critical battle, stealing something from the tomb, and watching as hundreds of thousands of soldiers on one side instantly die. One side loses massive numbers immediately. The surviving side assumes it's a new exploit or weapon. ashswag reveals it was him and demands surrender or he does it again. This works because it requires no army, requires no resources, just requires activate a trap that already exists, and instantly shifts the entire war. Option 4 is support the losing side, which is the opportunist play. ashswag doesn't want either Parrot or CinderCrest to win decisively. He wants prolonged conflict that weakens both sides. He watches the war develop. When one side starts losing badly, he supports them just enough to keep fighting, prevents decisive victory, and lets the war drain both sides. If Parrot is losing, he gives him resources from the tomb and helps him survive, but doesn't give him enough to win, just enough to keep fighting. If CinderCrest is losing, he provides intelligence or support and helps them regroup, but doesn't give them enough to win. The goal is mutual destruction where both sides exhaust themselves and ashswag waits until both are too weak to resist. So who will ashswag help? Let's analyze the options. If ashswag helps Parrot, the evidence for it is that Parrot spared him after the mafia fell. Parrot is the underdog who's losing badly. Helping Parrot prolongs the war, which is good for Ash, and Parrot's idealism makes him easier to manipulate. But evidence against him is massive. Parrot fought against the mafia for entire Season 1, led District 13 resistance, helped destroy the stasis chambers, would never trust him, and Parrot's moral code wouldn't allow mafia methods. The likelihood is very low. If ashswag helps CinderCrest, the evidence for it is that CinderCrest's philosophy about only the strong survive matches mafia philosophy. CinderCrest uses ruthless methods like massacres and starvation. Separator is power hungry like Ash, both want to control the server through force, and Billy is just like Ash, feeling no remorse. But the evidence against it is that CinderCrest has their own leadership with Separata. Ash wouldn't want to be in second in command, and CinderCrest might not need him since they're already winning. The likelihood is medium. If ashswag helps himself, this is peak ashswag. His entire character is about power for himself. He admitted he went too far but didn't stop wanting power. The tomb gives him leverage over both sides. He's been building wealth in secret during season 2. The director is dead, so no one is controlling him. This is perfect opportunity to take over while everyone else is distracted. The strategy is letting Parrot and CinderCrest destroy each other, rebuilding Mafia in shadows using desperate players, waiting for mutual exhaustion, revealing the Mafia when both sides are weak, and taking over the entire server. This is the most likely option. Here's my prediction. ashswag rebuilds the Invisible Mafia for 3 reasons. First, character consistency, where ashswag is power hungry, controlling, and manipulative. He didn't learn his lesson from season 1, he learned to be more careful. Second, perfect conditions exist, where the server is divided, leadership is distracted by war, thousands of desperate players exist, former Mafia members can be leveraged, and no one is watching for this. Third, the Mafia tomb exists in the story for a reason. It contains all resources, has stasis chambers for all former members, and has a failsafe. This will be used. Why is this brilliant? For ashswag, it uses existing leverage through the tomb, it doesn't require building from nothing, exploits the Civil War chaos, and takes over while everyone is distracted. For the story, it creates an unexpected third faction, forces Parrot and CinderCrest to work together against a common enemy, brings back season 1's biggest villain, and shows ashswag learn from his defeat. For the server, it means a 3-way war is more chaotic than 2-way. The Invisible Mafia counters both strategies, and no one is safe from invisible assassins. The Civil War isn't Parrot vs CinderCrest, it's Parrot vs CinderCrest versus the Invisible Mafia, and if ashswag learned anything from his defeat in season 1, it's this. Don't fight both sides at once, let them fight each other first, then take over when they are too weak to resist. The Mafia is coming back, and this time ashswag won't make the same mistakes. This is lettucek, the leader of the law and the person who was supposed to be king, until Parrot dethroned him, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the course of the Civil War. But to understand why, you need to know what kind of player lettucek actually is, because most people think that lettucek was evil from the start, which couldn't be further from the truth. Lettucek did not start powerful, he started trapped in the corrupt capital city, forced to mine with no way out, until Parrot showed up and freed everyone there including him. That is the detail nobody talks about. The same man lettucek spent an entire season trying to destroy is the man who gave him his first shot at freedom, and that dab never went away. We will get back to that. After Parrot freedom, lettucek built the Law, an organization meant to protect players and serve justice on the server. And for a while, that is exactly what it was. But somewhere along the way, protecting people stopped being enough, because the power that came with it started feeling more important than the mission. So lettucek, the sharpest mind this server has ever seen, turned the Law into a machine for control instead. He captured wemmbu, he hunted flamefrags across the server, and had him exiled from his own base. He executed a player named Spectacle, with an anvil live in front of the whole server as a warning to anyone watching. He talked manepear into handing over the end dimension. He built an army of thousands, most of them poorly equipped players he was willing to let die, because leading thousands looked powerful even when those thousands were losing. And through all of it, he was never reacting to events, he was ahead of them, just like the director, which is what made him so dangerous. He ran a server-wide election and had 7,000 more votes than Parrot. He nearly won it the right way, and when that started slipping, he declared himself the leader and took control anyway. Most players on the server have never even come close to what lettucek built, so when it all collapsed, it was not because someone outplayed him strategically. His own deputy ace turned on him at the most important moment to save Parrot, and his army got taken apart in the final battle. He ended up on that battlefield with nothing but a chestplate, and when he accepted it was over, he did not run. He walked back into the fight and surrendered, and asked them to kill him. Parrot spared his life. wemmbu, the same player lettucek had captured, imprisoned, and hunted for an entire season, let him live too. lettucek was locked up in the Northern Council under mining fatigue, which was the exact same punishment he once used on wemmbu. And before that cell closed, he looked at Parrot and said, "The server is too far gone now, and it will never be united again." He has been sitting in that prison watching himself be proven right ever since. Now let's talk about the Civil War, because the situation Parrot is in right now is bad in a way most people are not fully tracking. After Parrot became king, he opened spawn to thousands of new players, which stretched resources so thin that food shortages spread across the entire kingdom. The old players, the veterans who had spent months building everything on the server, watched what they created get overwhelmed overnight, and that resentment became CinderCrest. Parrot leads CinderCrest, and his army is not weak. These are experienced players, most of them in full netherite, united by one belief that Parrot ruined the server by opening spawn. Parrot himself lost his closest friends to bandit attacks after being forced out of capital city because there was not enough food left for everyone. So this is personal for him in a way that goes beyond ideology. CinderCrest opened the war by taking Fort Feather using a giant redstone blimp, which Parrot did not see coming, and even though he adapted at Merchant City and destroyed the blimp strategy with an anti-air cannon, CinderCrest kept moving and hit Highwater City next, which controls 80% of the food supply for the entire kingdom. Parrot built arrow cannons to hold them back, and it was working until wemmbu showed up alongside Arachnid, a third party who joined the war with no interest in old players or new players, only in seizing power for himself. Wembu's Arbor Strike cannon helped CinderCrest win that battle, and it leveled the entire city, and now Parrot's food supply is gone, Highwater is in enemies' hands, and the kingdom is starving while CinderCrest pushes deeper. What makes this even harder for Parrot is that he saw it coming and still could not stop it. He had wemmbu in his sights during that battle, tried to warn everyone and get his army out in time, but Arachnid had already positioned wemmbu perfectly, and there was nothing left to do. Losing Highwater City was a message to every player still on Parrot's side that even his best defenses are not enough when wemmbu is pointed at them. That loss shook the kingdom in a way that Fort Feather never did, because Fort Feather was just a battle, Highwater was the food. And now Parrot is sitting in a crumbling kingdom with a starving population, a two-front war and no clear path forward, which is exactly the moment a player like lettucek becomes the most valuable person on the server. Most people look at this and see a war Parrot is losing, but what they are missing is that Parrot has lettucek in prison. Think about what lettucek actually has that nobody else in this war has. He captured wemmbu and held him for an entire season, which means he understands exactly how wemmbu thinks and what drives him. He hunted flamefrags long enough to know how flame operates under pressure, and before being locked away he looked Flame in the eye and asked him to change, which visibly shook Flame enough that Flame told him he would try. That conversation clearly got through in a way that nobody else has managed, so that door is still open. And on top of all of that, lettucek owes his life to both Parrot and wemmbu, because they had every reason to execute him and chose not to, which means that Dapt is sitting at the top of his ledger every single day he is in that prison. Parrot has already visited lettucek once. Lettucek mocked him and told him the kingdom would collapse, but Parrot is running out of moves, and the one person who has consistently been right about where the server is headed is the one person behind bars. So Parrot goes back, and this time lettucek listens differently, because the two people who spared his life are both losing a war that is about to hand the server to Arachnid, a player who operates exactly the way lettucek used to, and lettucek knows better than anyone what that looks like from the inside. If lettucek gets out, the first thing he does is rebuild the law, not the dictatorship version, but the network, because the people who genuinely believed in the original mission of protecting players are still on the server. Circus Maximus tried to rebuild law in that direction, and it was working before it lost momentum. So the foundation is already there. lettucek built that organization from nothing once, and he knows every corner of it, which means rebuilding it is not starting over. It is plugging back into something that already exists and pointing it at the right target. Even a fraction of what the lore once was changes the troop count on Parrot's side dramatically, and more importantly, it changes how the rest of the server reads the war. Then he goes to flamefrags, not as Parrot's messenger but as himself, the person with enough shared history to actually get through. He does not argue about new players versus old players because that argument does not work on Flame. He makes Flame see one specific thing, which is that Arachnid winning this war does not fix the starvation Lomedy cares about, it just changes who controls the suffering. And with Arachnid holding wemmbu as a weapon, the server becomes something far worse than anything Parrot built. Flame is not fighting for justice right now. He is fighting to hand power to someone who does not care about any of the reasons Flame joined, and lettucek is the only person credible enough for that to land. Nobody else on the server has enough history with Flame to say that and have it mean something. Wemmbu is the final piece, and you might think wemmbu has every reason to reject anything lettucek says given their history, but lettucek does not need wemmbu to trust him. He just needs wemmbu to see that Arachnid is using him as a weapon, and the moment Arachnid gets what he wants, wemmbu has no value to him anymore, and he will kill eggchan. lettucek spent his entire career thinking like Arachnid, using people as tools and discarding them when they were no longer useful. So when he describes exactly how Arachnid sees wemmbu, it is not a guess, he is describing himself. That kind of honesty from someone who lived it is harder to ignore than anything Parrot could ever say. If all of this happens, the war breaks. A rebuilt lore army changes the numbers overnight. Flamefrags switching sides, removes CinderCrest's strongest fighter, and sends a message to every veteran player still following Sakurata. Wemmbu flipping away from Arachnid exposes Arachnid completely, because his entire power is built on fear and control, and the moment that cracks, the players under him have every reason to walk. The old players inside CinderCrest who join because they genuinely believed in something will start asking whether Separator is actually building a better server or just handing it to someone worse. That question spreading through CinderCrest's ranks while lettucek, flamefrags and wemmbu are all standing on Parrot's side does not slow the war down, it poisons it from the inside. lettucek said the server was too far gone. He said it would never be united again, and maybe he was right about the problem. But the reason I think he changes this war is that he is the only person left who has the mind, the network, and the personal history with the two most powerful players on the wrong side to actually do something about it. The man who almost destroyed the server might be the only one who knows how to save it, and the most interesting part is that Parrot already knows it too, because he already walked through that prison door once. The question is whether he goes back before it is too late. This is Weefees, also known as the Director, Minecraft's smartest player and Parrot's best friend, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the course of the Civil War. Now I know what you're thinking, but isn't the Director dead? And yes, he is. But this server has the underworld, it has null and has forces that operate by completely different rules than anything on the surface. So before you click off, stick with me, because by the end of this you're gonna understand exactly why a dead man is the most important player in this entire war. But to get there, you need to understand who Weefees actually was, because most people who know the name only know the villain version. They know the Director, the voice changer, the netherite armor, the assassins, the mind games. They do not know what was underneath all of it, and that is the part that makes this theory work. Weefees was quiet, calm, completely composed in a way that almost nobody on the server has ever been. He was never reactive, never making a move without knowing exactly what came after it. And underneath that composure was one single obsession that drove every decision he ever made, which was keeping Parrot safe. That is not a detail, that is the entire foundation of his character, because once you understand that everything Weefees ever did came from that one place, his whole story stops looking like villainy and starts looking like the most extreme act of loyalty the server has ever seen. He faked his own death, he built a second identity from the ground up, became the director, the most feared anonymous figure on the server, and spent an entire arc running assassins and psychological operations against Parrot from the shadows. And here's the part that sounds wrong until you sit with it. None of it was cruelty. He was not trying to hurt Parrot, he was testing him, engineering increasingly dangerous situations to measure exactly how Parrot handles pressure, betrayal, and survival, so that he could map every weakness before a real threat exploited them first. He hired its real me to attack Parrot. He sent Mr. Cube 6 to run psychological warfare against him. He brought in True Original, a hacker, who destroyed Bat's entire headquarters. He killed Newfully when he tried to leave the operation. He set netherite zombie traps, used Mr. Cube as a decoy director, controlled every variable around every meeting, and built Paragon, a fully designed prison with a stasis chamber and invisible guards, as a permanent home where he could keep Parrot close forever. Every single one of those moves was calculated. None of them were accidents. This is a player who looked 10 steps ahead while everyone else was still reading the board, and the most frightening part is that it worked. Nobody figured it out, nobody even came close until it was too late. So how did he die? Parrot smuggled his spyglass into Paragon past Weefy's own security. He dropped it, walked off his pressure plate, and left. Weefy stepped off his own plate to catch the spyglass, and that was the end of him. The most dangerous mind this server has ever produced was undone not by a better plan or a stronger player, but by his own instinct to catch something that belonged to his best friend. He died doing exactly what he always did, putting Parrot first, and it cost him everything. He has been gone ever since, but the underworld exists on this server, and Null exists. And if any force has both the power and the motive to bring back the most dangerous strategic mind in server history, it is them. And Weefy's only needs one reason to accept any deal they offer, which is the chance to be near Parrot again. That has always been all it would take. Now let's talk about where Parrot actually is, because the situation right now is generally bad in a way that is hard to overstate. After Parrot became king, he opened spawn to thousands of new players, which stretched food and resources so thin that shortages spread across the entire kingdom. The old players, the veterans who had spent months or years building everything on the server, watched what they created get overwhelmed overnight, and that resentment became CinderCrest. Separator leads CinderCrest, and his army is not a random group of angry players. These are experienced veterans, most of them in full netherite, united by genuine grievance. Separator himself lost his closest friends to bandit attacks, after being pushed out of Capital City because there was not enough food left to support everyone there. So when he says Parrot ruined the server, it is not just politics, it is personal in a way that makes it extremely hard to reason with. CinderCrest opened the war by taking Fort Feather with a redstone blimp assault, forcing Parrot to retreat through a tunnel while using a TNT trap to take out a chunk of CinderCrest's army on the way out. Parrot adapted at Merchant City, built an anti-air artillery trap during the march, and obliterated the blimp strategy when CinderCrest repeated it, killing most of their paratroopers mid-air. One clean win. But CinderCrest kept moving and marched on Highwater City next, which is the location that controls 80% of the food supply for Parrot's entire kingdom. Parrot delayed them at a bridge while 4C Vid built arrow cannons inside the city, and when those cannons fired, they wiped out 70% of CinderCrest's remaining army in one shot. Separator was forced to retreat to the water. The battle looked like it was over. And then Flame went invisible, snuck down to the artillery cannon and destroyed it from the inside. Shoebilly flew up and took out the arrow cannon from the air, and then wemmbu arrived with an elbow strike cannon, tasked specifically with killing Parrot, and Highwater City stopped being a battle and became a retreat. Parrot got Reyna out, barely got Teal moving in time, and sailed away from the city with no plan and no idea what came next. Highwater City fell. The food supply to the entire kingdom was cut. Separator stood over the city and announced that any player who joined the server before Parrot became king was welcome in CinderCrest, and anyone who did not join would be killed when CinderCrest took over. The war went from a military conflict to an extinction threat for every new player on the server, and Parrot is the only thing standing between them and that outcome. Most players look at that and see a war Parrot is losing badly, which is true, but what they are not seeing is something much more important. The 3 most dangerous players CinderCrest has, flamefrags, Billy, and wemmbu, are not dead because they believe in the cause. Flame joined because of Lomedy, his best friend who genuinely believes in what CinderCrest is fighting for, and Parrot said that himself when he walked out to talk to Flame at the bridge. He did not go to Flame because he was CinderCrest's strongest fighter. He went because they used to be friends who fought wars together, and he wanted to understand why Flame was there. Flame admitted Parrot had a point. He admitted he had been attacked by bandits inside the kingdom himself. He is not a true believer. He is one well-timed conversation away from standing down, and he has been that way since before Highwater City. Wemmbu arrived not as a committed CinderCrest soldier but as an outside force brought in by Youngie X, operating on personal relationships and fake loyalty rather than ideology. Billy is an aerial specialist whose involvement is military and not moral. None of these players are unmovable, and the only person who has ever been built to understand exactly that, to map every pressure point, every personal connection, every lever that moves a specific player, is Weefees. This is where the theory actually lives. Weefees does not come back to fight. He never fought. What Weefees does is watch, study, and plan. And he does it faster and more accurately than anyone else on the server has ever managed. He spent an entire arc doing nothing but observing how Parrot responds to pressure, which means he already has a complete map of how CinderCrest's most important players think, because their weakness is the same weakness Parrot always had. Too many emotions driving decisions. Personal relationships creating openings. Weefees has spent his whole existence finding those openings and walking straight through them. The first thing he does is go to Flame, not the way Parrot went, walking out in the open during a battle and hoping for honesty. Weefees engineers the conditions. He controls the variables around the conversation the same way he controlled every variable in every operation he ever ran. Flame is already halfway there because Parrot's argument at the bridge almost worked. Add Weefees to the equation and Flame is not just hearing a plea from an old friend. He is being shown with complete clarity that Arachnid winning this war does not fix the starvation Lomedy cares about. It just changes who is running the suffering. Flame is fighting to hand power to someone who does not care about a single reason Flame joined, and Weefees is the only person on the server who can make that argument land in a way that is impossible to dismiss. Wemmbu is the next piece. Wemmbu operates on dApps and personal relationships, which is exactly the kind of logic Weefees has always known how to reach. He does not need wemmbu to trust him or even like him. He just needs wemmbu to understand one thing, that Arachnid brought him in as a weapon, and the moment Arachnid gets what he wants, wemmbu stops being valuable and eggchan will die. Weefees has lived that reality from the other side. He used people as tools and moved them around the board and discarded the ones who outlived their purpose. When he explains to wemmbu how Arachnid sees him, it is not analysis, it is a confession. If both of those conversations land, the war does not just shift. It collapses on CinderCrest's side in a way that no military strategy could produce on its own. CinderCrest loses its most dangerous ground fighter in Flame, loses its elbow strikes in wemmbu, and suddenly the promise separator made to every veteran player on the server that CinderCrest is the winning side and joining them means safety starts to crack. That promise is built entirely on momentum. On Fort Feather falling, on Highwater falling, on Parrot sailing away with no plan. Take away Flame and wemmbu and that momentum reverses, and the old players who joined CinderCrest because it looked unbeatable start asking whether they back the right side before it is too late to change their answer. Parrot will go from a king who has no idea what to do next to a king supported by the most calculating mind the server has ever seen. And every player in CinderCrest knows what the director built. They know what Paragon was. They know that nobody outwitted him except Parrot, and only then because Weefees loved him too much to think straight in that final moment. A revived Weefees fighting alongside the one person who ever got through his defenses is not a threat anyone in CinderCrest has a plan for, because there is no plan for him. You cannot out-strategize the person who invented strategy on this server. Weefy said nothing when he died, he just stepped off the plate, but if he comes back, everything he does will be for the same reason it always was. And this time, the enemy is exactly the kind of player he was built to dismantle. The only question left is whether Parrot, after everything, the assassins, Paragon, the pressure plates, can look at his best friend and believe that this time, they're actually on the same side. This is Spoke, a monster manipulator and Parrot's best friend, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the course of the Civil War. But let's back up because right now Spoke has no armor, no items, and he's trapped in a prison made by Yamato P. But by the end of this video, you're gonna understand exactly why he is the key to Parrot winning the Civil War. To get there, you need to know what kind of player Spoke actually is, because the version of Spoke most people know is the one Yamato P wants them to see, the server villain, the reason 1,000 players ended up in a nether prison. That version of Spoke is a lie, built carefully over 2 seasons by a man who needed someone to blame, and it has worked perfectly until now. The real Spoke is much harder to deal with. His entire career has been built around being dangerous without gear or an army behind him. He does not win by suiting up and fighting harder than everyone else. He wins by getting inside the system, learning how it works, finding the one crack nobody is watching, and kicking it open at exactly the right moment. He took down the invisible mafia not with netherite armor or a massive team, but by doing exactly that. He got in, destroyed all the stasis chambers, and the whole thing fell apart around him. That matters because Purgatory was designed specifically to take away everything Spoke relies on. Yamato P stripped him down to nothing, dropped him on a single block surrounded by lava, poisoned him, and told the gods that the normal rules did not apply to this prisoner. Yamato studied Spoke's patterns and built the entire prison around them. Take away the tricks, take away the items, and Spoke becomes manageable. That was the plan. But Spoke got out of solitude using a fire resistance potion he had kept hidden in his inventory during a rushed item check. One tiny detail. The prison Yamato called impossible to escape had one flaw that Spoke noticed and Yamato did not, and that tells you everything about how differently these two players think. Yamato builds systems and trusts them completely. Spoke looks for the thing that the system forgot to think about. That gap between them is where this whole theory lives, and it is also why Yamato has already lost even if he does not know it yet. Getting out of solitude was only the first thing Spoke did in Purgatory though, and it was not even close to the most important one. While he was moving through that prison with nothing on him, he walked into the guard quarters and found a mace sitting on an item frame. He took it. His exact reaction was that he had never used a mace before, and that line matters more than it sounds like it does. The mace is the strongest weapon in Minecraft. Spoke's whole career has had one weak spot, which is that he loses straight up fights. Running, trapping, stalling, waiting for backup, that has always been how he survives, because going toe to toe with someone in a PvP fight was never something he could win. A Spoke who can actually win a direct fight is a player that nobody on the server has had to deal before, and nobody has a plan for it. Then he did a thing that changes everything. He got the prisoners together in the arena and told them the truth. Not Spoke is here, Yamato P. He took the name that Yamato had kept hidden behind a wall of silence and put it in front of over 1,000 players who had been sitting in that prison with no idea who actually sent them there. And Yamato, who is usually the most composed and unreadable person on the server, visibly cracked. He said it was not supposed to be like this. That is the first time anyone has ever seen Yamato react to something he did not see coming, and Spoke pulled it off with nothing in his inventory in the middle of a prison that was built to keep him powerless. That is a shift in how the whole power structure of Purgatory works, because Yamato's operation runs on one thing above everything else. The prisoners do not know who is responsible for putting them there. They know Spoke, they're angry at Spoke. Yamato sits safely behind that story and nobody can touch him. Spoke destroyed that in one move and there's no way to undo it. Every prisoner in the arena now has a name, a face, and a very personal reason to want to fight back. This leads directly to the Unstable SMP Civil War. When Parrot became king, he opened spawn to thousands of new players, which stretched the server's food and resources way past what they could handle. The old players who had spent months or even years building everything on the server watched it get flooded overnight, and that anger became CinderCrest. Separata leads CinderCrest with an army of experienced players, most of them in full netherite, and they're not just angry about policy. Separata lost his closest friends to bandit attacks after getting pushed out of capital city because there was not enough food left for everyone there. This war is not a debate for him, it is grief that turned into a mission. CinderCrest hit Fort Feather first with a giant redstone blimp, forced Parrot to retreat through a tunnel and gain a clear path deeper into the kingdom. Parrot rebuilt his strategy at Merchant City, set up an anti-air trap while CinderCrest marched toward him, and completely wiped out the blimp when they used it again. One solid win, but CinderCrest kept pushing and went straight for Highwater City next, which produces 80% of the food for Parrot's entire kingdom. Parrot stalled them at the bridge while his team built arrow cannons inside the city, and when those cannons went off, they took out 70% of CinderCrest's army in one shot. For a moment, it looked like the war was about to turn. Then Flame went invisible, snuck to the artillery cannon and blew it up from the inside. Shubili flew up and destroyed the arrow cannon from the air. Then wemmbu arrived with an arbor strike cannon and a direct order to kill Parrot, and the battle was already over before Parrot could react. He got Reyna out, barely got Teal moving, and sailed away from Highwater with no idea what to do next. His food supply was gone. Separata stood over the city and told every player on the server that anyone who joined before Parrot became king was welcome in CinderCrest, and everyone else would be killed when they took over. Parrot is now running a war with a starving population, no food coming in, and an army built mostly of new players going up against full netherite veterans who have been on the server for years. The numbers do not add up for him without something that changes the picture completely, and right now he does not have it. What he does not know yet is that Spoke just found it. Purgatory is holding over 1,000 players. These are not random people who got lost, they are players who lost it long enough to get caught by Null, which means they have some level of skill, and mixed in with them are confirmed rebels from the Farlands who had already been running resistance groups outside spawn. These players know how to organize and push back under pressure. They have been sitting in a nether prison the whole time with no clue who put them there, and now they know the name. That mix of numbers, skill, and very fresh anger at one specific person is something that does not exist anywhere else in this war right now. Spoke already told everyone in that prison what he plans to do. He said when he escapes and gathers the armies of Unstable to march to Purgatory and free everybody, Jamato will be the first to go. He was talking to Jamato when he said it, but the army he is describing comes back to the main server. Spoke and Parrot built a real friendship during their time going up against the law in Season 2. So a Spoke who shows up at spawn with 1,000 freed prisoners behind him is exactly the kind of help Parrot cannot get from anywhere else right now. Those prisoners would not be fighting because they care about Parrot's vision for the server. They would be fighting because Spoke handed them a name and a reason. And that kind of motivation tends to stick. The army is a big deal, but the information Spoke is carrying might matter even more in the long run. Jamato's whole setup only works because the main server has no idea how large it actually is. Players disappear and people blame Spoke for it. The civil war keeps everyone looking in the other direction while Jamato quietly keeps running his operation in the nether. If Spoke gets out and brings the full story back to spawn, it changes what this war is actually being fought over. Parrot has no idea that over 1,000 players are missing from his kingdom. His food supply is cut and his people are going hungry. But an entire dimension away, Jamato has been pulling players off the server for months. Players who could have been farming, trading, and fighting on Parrot's side in a war when numbers are already the biggest problem. The food crisis that caused this whole civil war to start may be partly connected to all those missing players, and if that becomes public, it does not let Parrot off the hook for these decisions, but it does give CinderCrest's fighters a reason to stop and ask whether they have been pointing their anger at the right person. Flamefrags is already shaky on this. He told Parrot at the bridge that Parrot had a point, said he had been attacked by bandits inside the kingdom himself, and clearly hesitated before walking away. He is only in this war because Lamedy believes in what CinderCrest is doing, and Lamedy joined because people are dying and going hungry under Parrot's rule. If the Null story gets out and Lamedy finds out that a hidden group has been making the food problem worse by removing players for months, the whole reason Flame joined starts to fall apart. No argument Parrot makes at a bridge in the middle of a battle could ever do that, but the truth about Null coming out publicly might. Most people look at Spoke's situation right now and see someone who is done. A million blocks from spawn, nothing in his pockets, locked in a prison that was designed around his exact playstyle, but Spoke has been here before, and every single time the server decided he was finished, he found the one thing nobody thought to close off. He found it in the Invisible Mafia, he found it in Purgatory, he is gonna find it again, and when he does, the server is not gonna be ready for what walks out with him. Because this time when he leaves, he is not slipping out alone in the middle of the night. He has over 1,000 players sitting in that prison who now know the right name to be angry at. A mace he picked up and has never used before, and a promise he made out loud in front of everyone. Jamato spent 2 full seasons building the perfect trap for Spoke. He just forgot to check the inventory on the way in. This is Clownpierce, the deadliest player on Unstable SMP, ruler of the nether dimension and Parrot's business partner, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the course of the civil war. But let's back up and talk about Clownpierce's true power, because he doesn't just control territory on Unstable SMP, he claims the entire nether dimension as his territory. He constructed a massive, highly secured vault to store his wealth and began hunting any player who entered the dimension without permission. His goal is to create a monopoly over netherite and other essential nether resources. This means every faction in the Civil War, Parrot's Kingdom and CinderCrest, everyone needs to go through Clownpierce to get the resources required for war. He's not fighting for either side, he's selling to both sides. Keep this monopoly in mind because it's the foundation of his power. Now here's where things get critical. Clownpierce is already selling to both sides. He doesn't care who wins, he cares about profit. And in Parrot's latest interaction with him, we learn something devastating. CinderCrest has already purchased goods from Clownpierce. When Parrot came to request 40,000 TNT to defend his kingdom from CinderCrest, Clown revealed that CinderCrest had already departed towards Parrot's kingdom with supplies they bought from him. He warned Parrot you would stand no chance without potions, technology, or gear. Clownpierce is a war profiteer who's made himself essential to both sides, which means whoever he decides to stop selling to loses the war immediately. But there's a grudge that changes everything. When Parrot asked for 40,000 TNT, Clownpierce charged 3 times the normal price, 60,000 diamonds instead of 20,000. Why? Because he's still holding a grudge against Parrot for raiding his vault. Back in the days, flamefrags and Parrot would Teal launch a stealth mission to sneak into Clownpierce's nether vault. Flamefrags wanted to assassinate Clownpierce to get information about wemmbu's location. Parrot wanted to breach and loot the secure vault. But Flamefrags betrayed Parrot and told Clown their location in exchange for wemmbu's location. Clownpierce captured both Parrot and Teal and was about to execute Parrot when Flamefrags betrayed him again, saying you'd have to get through me first. Clownpierce ran away to stop his vault from being ransacked, leaving his army behind, and Parrot successfully raided the vault. Clownpierce hasn't forgiven that insult. Parrot raided his most secure location, his pride, and got away with it. Remember this grudge because it determines everything Clownpierce does next. Let's examine Clownpierce's history because his pattern reveals exactly what he'll do. Throughout Season 1, Clownpierce operated as an independent force of chaos. He was hired by Prince Zam to assassinate Parrot, but he didn't do it for ideology, he did it for payment. His pattern is consistent, he gets paid then does the job. He entertains himself by tormenting targets with games and scavenger hunts and social experiments, and he protects his interests, especially Brenzy who's his weak spot and Foray MC who's his close friend. During the Invisible Mafia arc, Clownpierce worked with ashswag and received a special netherite trim, marking him as one of ashswag's most elite players. When the Mafia needed muscle, Clownpierce was there. When they needed someone intimidated, Clownpierce handled it. But the moment the Mafia fell, Clownpierce moved on to his next scheme. He doesn't have loyalty to factions, he has loyalty to power, profit, and entertainment. Keep this pattern of self-interest in mind. Despite the grudge, Clownpierce made a deal with Parrot. He sold him the 40,000 TNT at inflated prices and told him, you're welcome to come back to me whenever you need to buy more things. But he added a warning, if you come back for any reason other than that, I would kill you. This establishes the relationship clearly. Business only, no alliances, cross me and you die. This is critical because it means Clownpierce is still willing to do business with Parrot despite the vault raid, but only on his terms and at his prices. So why would Clownpierce join the civil war? There are 4 reasons and they all point to the same conclusion. Reason 1 is profit maximization. Clownpierce is already selling to both sides, but wars don't last forever. Eventually one side will win and control the entire server. If he doesn't pick a winning side, the winner might shut down his monopoly. Parrot could decide Clownpierce supplied our enemies, he's a war criminal, we're taking the nether. CinderCrest could decide Clownpierce sold to Parrot, he helped them kill our soldiers, execute him. To protect his monopoly, Clownpierce will need to back a winner. Reason 2 is entertainment. Clownpierce thrives on entertainment. He loves grand entrances, complex games, social experiments, and tormenting targets. A civil war where thousands of max netherite players fight for control of the entire server, where kings fall, civilizations burn, and obelisk cannons rain from the sky, that's the greatest show on the server. Clownpierce won't want to just watch from the sidelines, he'll want to participate in the chaos, and the way he participates is by tipping the scales dramatically in favor of whoever entertains him most. Reason 3 is the grudge against Parrot. Clownpierce is still angry about the vault raid. He charged Parrot triple price as punishment and warned him that coming back for any reason except business means death. But Parrot hasn't paid for what he did. When the war reaches its climax and Clownpierce has the opportunity to make Parrot suffer publicly while also securing his business interests, he'll take it. Remember this desire for revenge because it's personal, not just business. Reason 4 is protecting Branzy and Foray MC. Clownpierce has 2 weak spots, Branzy, who's described as his Achilles heel, and Foray MC, who's his close friend. If either of them are threatened by the war, if CinderCrest or Parrot's forces target them, Clownpierce will intervene immediately and decisively. He might not care about ideologies or kingdoms, but he absolutely cares about the 2 people he's close to. But before we continue, I want to ask you to subscribe, because this video took hours to make. And subscribing would genuinely help a ton. Also, let me know in the comments which side you think Clownpierce will join. So, who will Clownpierce help? Let's analyze both options. If Clownpierce helps Parrot, the evidence for it is that Parrot is a paying customer who just bought 40,000 TNT. Clownpierce has worked with Parrot before against the mafia. Parrot represents stability with a kingdom that has laws and trade and civilization. Clownpierce's business thrives in stable environments where factions need resources. And if Parrot wins, the nether monopoly continues as is. But the evidence against it is massive. The vault raid grudge means Parrot stole from him and got away with it. Parrot is losing with food supply cut off and 2 major defeats. Clownpierce warned him coming back means death. Parrot's idealism about protecting new players doesn't align with Clown's ruthlessness, and helping Parrot means going against CinderCrest, who are also customers. The likelihood Clownpierce helps Parrot is only 30%. If Clownpierce helps CinderCrest, the evidence for it is overwhelming. CinderCrest has already purchased goods from him as established customers. CinderCrest is winning, they took Fort Feather, took Highwater City, and cut off food supply. CinderCrest's philosophy that only the strong survive aligns with Clown's ruthlessness. CinderCrest has Jubilee, who's Teal's former master and an Elytra Macing specialist, and Clownpierce respects strength. CinderCrest has wemmbu with an Arbor Strike capability, and flamefrags, who's a combat master. Helping the winning side protects his monopoly long term, and here's the key, it's revenge against Parrot, where he can make him suffer publicly while calling it business. The evidence against it is minimal. Flamefrags betrayed him during the vault raid, but Flame also betrayed Parrot. CinderCrest might not need his help since they already have overwhelming force. CinderCrest plans genocide, which might be too extreme even for Clown, and if CinderCrest wins, they might decide they don't need his monopoly. But the likelihood Clownpierce helps CinderCrest is 60%, but that's a third option that's the most Clownpierce move possible. He helps himself. This is the chaos option where he doesn't pick sides, he picks entertainment. He could sell to both sides, then betray both at the critical moment, take over the server himself while everyone else is weakened, and use the war to eliminate competition and secure total nether control. The strategy would be continuing to sell to both Parrot and CinderCrest. letting them weaken each other, and when both sides are depleted and desperate, revealing he's been playing both sides. Then he demands control of Spawn, the Northern Council, or key territory, saying you want to end this war, you go through me. This creates the ultimate entertainment where clownpierce becomes kingmaker, forcing Parrot and Separata to negotiate through him while he hosts all the resources they need. The likelihood of this chaos option is only 10%, but it would be the most spectacular outcome. Here's my prediction. Clownpierce will join CinderCrest for 4 specific reasons. First, they are winning. Clownpierce respects strength and CinderCrest has thousands of max netherite players. Shield Billy as an elite combatant, flamefrags as a top 5 fighter, wemmbu with orbital strikes, a giant airship known as the Blimp, and they already took 2 major cities. Backing the winner protects his business. Second, the grudge against Parrot. Clownpierce can frame joining CinderCrest as business while actually getting revenge for the vault raid. He can make Parrot suffer, watch his kingdom burn, and charge CinderCrest for the privilege. Third, Clownpierce is ruthless and dangerous. He torments targets for entertainment. He hunts people relentlessly. CinderCrest's only the strong survive philosophy matches his personality better than Parrot's protect everyone idealism. Fourth, the deal. Clownpierce could offer CinderCrest unlimited netherite for armor and tools and weapons for thousands of soldiers, potions including strength and speed and resistance for the entire army, TNT and technology for traps and cannons and redstone machines, and personal combat support with Clownpierce himself joining battles. In exchange, he gets a guaranteed nether monopoly after CinderCrest wins, payment in diamonds and resources from conquered territories, freedom to operate without interference, and protection for Brenzy and Foray MC. Let me walk through exactly how Clownpierce's involvement changes the war. Separata stands on Highwater City platform with a speech about building a world for people who deserve it. As he finishes, Clownpierce lands beside him. Clownpierce addresses the server saying, "I'm opening the nether to CinderCrest. Anyone who enters without their permission dies. Consider this my contribution to making the server entertaining again." The impact is devastating. Parrot's kingdom loses all netherite access. They can't mine netherite, can't make new armor, can't repair existing gear, and are forced to fight with whatever they have left. Meanwhile, CinderCrest gets unlimited resources where every soldier can be fully maxed. Lost gear is instantly replaced, they have potions for every battle and TNT for every siege. Parrot's only option becomes assassination, where he must kill Clownpierce to reopen the nether. But Clown is one of the deadliest players on the server, protected by CinderCrest's army, with Foray MC watching his back. But Clownpierce isn't just a merchant, he's also Minecraft's deadliest player. Imagine Parrot is retreating from another lost battle, and suddenly Clownpierce appears with his signature grand entrance. He doesn't kill Parrot immediately, he toys with him, creates elaborate traps, making him suffer for raiding the vault. This breaks Parrot's kingdom spirits. Parrot's forces see their king being hunted by Minecraft's deadliest player and think, we can't win this. The war isn't just about resources anymore, it's about Parrot being personally tormented by someone he wronged, who now has the backing of the winning side. There's an alternative scenario where Clownpierce betrays everyone, which is the chaos option. He sells to both sides throughout the war, both Parrot and CinderCrest become dependent on his supplies, and the war reaches stalemate at Northern Council. Then Clownpierce cuts off both sides simultaneously and announces the nether is closed. No one gets resources until I get what I want. He demands control of Spawn as the price to reopen supply lines. Both Parrot and CinderCrest have to negotiate with him. Clownpierce becomes the true power on the server, and whoever agrees to his terms get resources and wins. The civil war ends with Clownpierce as the hidden ruler. This is the most Clownpierce thing possible, but it requires perfect timing and massive risk because both sides could unite against him. This is the underworld, the hidden dimension beneath the nether, and I believe that it is the thing that's gonna change the civil war forever. But to understand why, you need to stop thinking about this war as if it takes place in the world everyone can see. Because that assumption is wrong. There's an entire dimension sitting underneath all of it that nobody in this war has accounted for, and the people who control it have exploits that will destroy CinderCrest. So what actually is the underworld? Because most people who have heard of it still do not fully understand what they're dealing with. The nether has a bedrock floor. That floor is supposed to be the absolute bottom of playable space. Below it is the void. Below void is nothing. Except that is not true on this server, because the underworld exists in the space beneath the floor. a full dimension with terrain, a castle complex, a graveyard, a tower with working brewing equipment, and a portal hub with approximately 20 portals each connecting to a specific location on the server described as a point of interest. This did not appear by accident. Someone built it. Someone who had the ability to place blocks in a dimension that normal players cannot interact with at all, which brings us to the most important detail about the underworld that almost nobody has stopped to think about. When wemmbu and Boostful fell through into the underworld, they discovered immediately that neither of them could place or break a single block. Not because they lacked materials, because the dimension itself rejected the input entirely. The rule is not enforced through permissions they could work around, it is built into the structure of the dimension. Only the Soul Keepers, identified by their green armor trims, can place and break blocks inside the underworld. Think about what that means in a fight. Every combat tactic that relies on changing the environment, blocking corridors, building cover, placing water to break falls, sealing exits, become exclusively available to one side. Flamefrags is a top 5 fighter on this server. Shubili is one of the best aerial combat players alive. Both of them, inside the underworld, cannot place a single block, while Soul Keepers can build whatever they want around them in real time. That is not a small advantage. That is a complete inversion of how combat works on this server, and it belongs entirely to a faction that neither Parrot nor Separata has ever tried to talk to. Now let's talk about the portal hub, because this is where the underworld stops being an interesting lore detail and starts being the most important location in the entire Civil War. There are around 20 portals in that hub. 2 have confirmed destinations. 1 connects to Serpentbound's kingdom in the Farlands. 1 connects to an unnamed forest area. The other 18 points somewhere that nobody outside the Soul Keepers know. The portal that connects to Serpentbound's kingdom did not link to a random patch of wilderness. It connected to a specific existing civilization, a populated, strategically significant settlement. That is the pattern. These portals do not go to random coordinates, they go to places that matter. Apply that logic to 18 remaining portals and ask yourself what the most important locations on the server are right now. Spawn, the center of the entire Civil War, and the location CinderCrest is marching toward. The Northern Council, Parrot's capital, and almost certainly the site of the war's final battle. The Mafia tomb in the far end, containing every resource from Season 1 and the stasis chambers of hundreds of thousands of former members. Every single one of these could be one of the 18 remaining portals. But what does this actually mean for the Civil War? A portal that connects directly to Spawn changes the war directly. The faction that finds that portal and uses it can appear at the most contested location on the server without traveling overland, without passing through nether corridors, without touching any checkpoint or defensive position either side has built. Every fortification Parrot has constructed on the approach routes to his capital becomes irrelevant to anyone who walks through the right door in the underworld. This brings us to Clownpierce, because his position in this war is built entirely on a geographic assumption that the underworld proves false. Clownpierce controls the nether. Every piece of netherite that exists on the server passed through his monopoly. Every army that moved at speed did so through corridors he owns. Both sides of the Civil War buy from him rather than challenge him because his control seems absolute. His monopoly was declared over the nether. It was not and could not be declared over a dimension he does not know exists beneath it. The underworld has portals connecting to locations across the server. A player with underworld access and portal knowledge can move between significant server locations without ever entering the nether's navigable space, without passing through any corridor Clownpierce monitors, without touching any resource he taxes, without triggering any system he has built to track movement. The faction that figures this out does not need to buy transportation from Clownpierce. They do not need to negotiate with him for resource movement. Their logistics chain runs underneath the dimension he controls, and he has no idea it exists. That is not winning a battle against Clownpierce. That is making his position irrelevant without fighting him at all. Now here's the detail that connects all of this to a specific play and a specific moment that the server has already seen. When wemmbu and eggchan were walking through the Farlands with Yamato, they noticed small monuments embedded in the ground that wemmbu said looked like they were connected to the underworld. Yamato's response was immediate. You're not supposed to know about that place. Not a denial that the connection existed, not an explanation of what the monuments were, just a firm statement that the knowledge itself was off limits. Those monuments are access points. Yamato knows where they are. He got that knowledge even from players he is temporarily working with. Every one of those Farlands monuments is a potential key to the portal hub, and nobody has gone back to find them because nobody except Yamato fully understood what they were looking at. Yamato has green armor trims. The Soul Keepers have green armor trims. He has been to the underworld multiple times, knows the monuments, knows the portal hub, and responds to questions about it with the authority of someone who belongs there rather than someone who visited. Whether he is a Soul Keeper or simply someone the Soul Keepers have accepted into their dimension is less important than what his access means. He is the only active player on the main server with both knowledge of the underworld's layout and the reason to use it during the Civil War. His null operation is built around stability and controlling information. The Civil War is the largest destabilizing event this server has ever seen. At some point, those two things intersect. And when they do, Yamato's underworld access becomes an operational asset in the conflict above it. He does not need to fight anyone, he does not need to deploy hunters or use the null strike on nether corridors. He just needs to stand at the portal hub and decide who gets to use it. Then there's the gold block, and this is the detail that changes everything about what the underworld represents. In the center of the underworld's castle, there is a gold block. Standing near it causes extreme immediate game lag, not mouse slowdown but significant performance impact from proximity alone. Ordinary gold blocks do not compute anything. The lag that this block produces suggests active server level processing happening in real time when players get close to it. Something is running when players approach it and nobody has explained what. Weefies, who is confirmed dead, posted a direct reference to the underworld specifically after wemmbu's exploration video came out. He asked if viewers had seen the end of wemmbu's newest video, pointing specifically at the moment in the footage involving the gold block. Weefies is dead. He posted about the block in the hidden dimension that causes server computation when approached. The Soul Keepers are named for a function. They keep something. The dimension is named after death. A place called the Underworld, beneath all other dimensions, run by entities whose title references preservation of something that persists after players die, with a block at its center that the server actively computes when triggered by proximity. The most straightforward reading is that the gold block stores something related to players who have died, that the Soul Keeper's actual function is not just governing the dimension, but maintaining whatever persists after death from the server. And that Weefies, who has been dead for a whole season, knows about it because he is connected to it in a way that a living player cannot be. If that reading is correct, then every confirmed death on the server becomes a question, not just Weefies, players who died in major battles, players whose totems popped in purgatory. The distinction between permanent death and Soul Keeper custody is the most important question on the server, and the answer lives in a dimension that neither Parrot nor Separator has ever visited with that question in mind. Now think about what the Soul Keeper themselves are as a faction, because nobody in this war has thought about them as something to recruit. When wemmbu and Boosfer fell into the underworld, the Soul Keepers responded with containment. They captured Boosfer, imprisoned wemmbu, pursued both when they tried to escape, used happy gas for aerial mobility, and coordinated multiple agents at the same time. When their leader died, the remaining keepers retreated rather than continuing the fight. That last detail matters. They pulled back. This is a faction that defends territory and enforces the rules. It does not seek conquest. Every major player in the Civil War has tried to recruit the most valuable fighters on the server. CinderCrest pulled in flamefrags and Shubili. Parrot built loyalties across multiple cities. Arachnid used eggchan to secure wemmbu. Nobody has approached the faction that controls instant transit to every important location on the server and operates in a dimension where opposing armies cannot modify the environment at all. The Soul Keepers are the most under-recruited military asset in the entire war, and their documented behavior suggests they respond to respectful contact differently than they respond to armed incursion. The faction that makes genuine first contact with an actual offer rather than an accidental fall through gains the portal hub, and the portal hub is a master key to every location this war is being fought over. Both sides of the Civil War has been playing the same game. Neither Parrot nor Separator built their war plans around a dimension they did not know existed. That is the entire foundation of their strategic thinking being built on an incomplete map. The player who finds the right portal, or makes the right contact with the Soul Keepers, or figures out what Yamato has been protecting in the Farlands does not win a battle. They win access to so much more. The most important move left in the Civil War has not happened yet. It will not happen on the battlefield. It will happen when someone walks into a portal hub with 20 doors and figures out which one opens into the room where the war gets decided. This is eggchan, Minecraft's strongest player, wemmbu's best friend, and I believe that he is the person that's gonna change the Civil War forever. But to understand why, you need to understand something about how this war actually works, because everyone is focused on the wrong thing. The whole server is watching CinderCrest's army, Parrot's food crisis, and whether wemmbu pulls the trigger on that elbow cannon again. Nobody is asking why wemmbu is even on that side to begin with, and the answer to that question is sitting at the top of Arachnid's castle, with mining fatigue and no way out. Eggchan is not a side character in this war, he is the reason the war looks the way it does. And the moment his situation changes, everything changes with it. To understand why, you need to know what Arachnid actually bought at that auction, because most people don't remember it. Wemmbu showed up with Abu strikes, multiple factions fought over one person, and the whole island turned into a war zone. But strip away the chaos and look at what Arachnid understood that nobody else did. He did not just buy a hostage, he bought a leash on the most powerful weapon on the entire server. Every other faction at that auction was thinking about eggchan. Arachnid was thinking about wemmbu. He paid the highest price because he knew that whoever held eggchan held wemmbu, and whoever held wemmbu held the Abu strike cannon that could level any city on the server. He was right. Wemmbu became his second in command, fought his battles, and fired the shot that destroyed Highwater City and cut off 80% of Parrot's food supply. All of that came from one decision at one auction, which means the entire power structure Arachnid built on this war rests on eggchan staying exactly where he is. That is the part nobody is saying out loud. Arachnid is not winning this war because he is the strongest or the smartest. He is winning because he made one purchase that gave him control over someone else's strength. And a position built entirely on controlling another person has one very obvious weak point. Now let's talk about where Parrot actually stands, because the situation is genuinely bad in a way that is hard to overstate. When Parrot became king, he opened spawn to thousands of new players, which stretched food and resources way past what the server could handle. The old players who had spent months building everything watched it collapse overnight, and CinderCrest was formed. CinderCrest hit Fort Feather first with a redstone blimp assault and forced Parrot to retreat through a tunnel. Parrot came back at Merchant City with an anti-air trap he built during the march, and destroyed the blimp when CinderCrest repeated the same move. One solid win. But CinderCrest pushed straight to Highwater City, which controls 80% of the food coming into Parrot's kingdom. Parrot was winning at first, but then wemmbu arrived with an Arbo strike cannon pointed directly at the city, and it was over before Parrot could react. He got out with Raina and Teal and sailed away with no plan. Highwater fell. The food supply was gone. Separator stood over the city and told the whole server that anyone who joined before Parrot became king was welcome in CinderCrest, and everyone else would die when they won. Parrot is now fighting with a starving population, no food coming in, and an army of mostly new players going up against experienced veterans in full netherite. He has stayed alive through smart strategy, but smart strategy alone cannot win a war when the other side has better gear, more players, and a weapon that can flatten any city on the server in seconds. He needs something that changes the whole picture, and right now that something is locked in Arachnid's castle. What makes this even harder for Parrot is that he knows it. He watched wemmbu hesitate at high water before firing. He watched wemmbu spare his life. Wemmbu has history with Parrot, and that history almost stopped him from pulling the trigger. Parrot is smart enough to see that hesitation for what it is, a crack in Arachnid's control, and smart enough to understand that the crack does not start with wemmbu, it starts with eggchan. Free eggchan and you do not just remove a hostage from the board, you remove the only reason wemmbu is pointing his cannon in the wrong direction. That is not a side objective for Parrot, that is the most important strategic move left in this entire war, and Parrot is the kind of player who figures that out before anyone else does. So here's how eggchan changes everything. There are two ways this plays out, and both of them end up in the same place. The first is Parrot breaking eggchan out himself. Parrot has survived this entire war by seeing things before they happen and planning around them. If he targets eggchan's location with the right team at the right moment, Arachnid loses everything he paid for at that auction in a single night. The operation does not need to be massive, it just needs to be precise, which is exactly how Parrot operates. He is not a player who wins through brute force, he wins by identifying the one move that creates the most damage with the least exposure, and breaking eggchan out of that castle is that move. Arachnid would never see it coming because he has spent this entire war assuming Parrot is too busy surviving to go on offense. The second path is Youngie, and this one is actually more interesting. Youngie has been inside the underground civilization long enough to see how Arachnid truly operates, and what that looks like from the inside is very different from what it looks like from the outside. Arachnid does not build loyalty, he purchases it or forces it. The players around him are not true believers. They are people who calculated that being on his side was safer than being against him, and that calculation only holds as long as Arachnid keeps winning. Youngie Axe is one of those players, and the closer you sit to someone who rules through fear, the more clearly you see how thin that fear is. If Youngie reaches a point where staying loyal costs more than it gives, betraying Arachnid becomes the only rational move, and the most damaging thing Youngie Axe could possibly do is not attack Arachnid directly. It is freeing eggchan, because that one action unravels every piece of control Arachnid has built in this war at once, and it does it without Youngie Axe having to win a single fight. Either path leads to the same outcome. Eggchan gets out, and Arachnid's position falls apart faster than anyone on the server is currently expecting. Because here's what actually happens the moment eggchan is freed. Wemmbu does not quietly stop working for Arachnid. Wemmbu has been fighting battles he did not choose, for side he did not pick, because the one person he cares about most was being held over his head the entire time. That is not loyalty, that is a cage. And nobody walks out of a cage feeling neutral about the person who locked them in it. The second eggchan is free, Wemmbu does not step away from the war. He steps toward the people responsible for using someone he loves as a tool. With an elbow strike cannon in hand and a very clear idea of where to point it, Arachnid becomes the target, and he can't do anything about it. Think about what that actually means for the shape of this war. Parrot lost Highwater City because of Wembu's elbow strikes. That same weapon on Parrot's side does not replace what was lost. It threatens every position CinderCrest currently holds, every city they captured, every supply line they control, every stronghold they built their momentum around is now sitting under the same kind of threat that took Highwater in one shot. The veterans in CinderCrest who joined because it looked like the winning side have to seriously ask themselves whether it still looks that way. Separator built CinderCrest's entire recruiting power on momentum. Fort Feather fell, Highwater fell, the food supply got cut. Each win made the next recruit easier because the server could see which direction the war was moving in. Momentum is the single most powerful force in a war like this, and the moment Wemmbu flips, that momentum does not slow down, it genuinely just reverses. The players sitting on the fence who were waiting to see which side came out ahead suddenly see a completely different picture, and uncommitted players do not stay neutral when the balance shifts this clearly and this fast. Flamefrags is the piece of this that could make the shift permanent. Flame is not in this war because he believes in what Separator is building. He is there because Lomedy believes in it, and Lomedy joined because people are suffering under Parrot's kingdom. Flame already told Parrot at the bridge that Parrot had a point. He admitted he had been attacked by bandits inside the kingdom. He visibly wavered before walking away, and that conversation happened in the middle of a battle with no time to think. Give Flame a quiet moment to look at the new state of the war, where Wemmbu has left Arachnid's side and the orbital cannon is no longer backing CinderCrest, and the thing Flame thought he was fighting for starts to look very different. He joined a side that seemed like it was fighting for something real. If that side is now propped up by Arachnid pulling strings with no orbital cannon left to protect them, Flame's reason for being there gets a lot harder to defend to himself. Most people measuring this war are looking at two things: strength and food supply. CinderCrest wins on both right now, and that is why almost every prediction video has Parrot losing without some massive shift. But the reason CinderCrest wins on both traces back to one moment at one auction on one island. Arachnid bought eggchan, got wemmbu, used wemmbu to take High Water City, and cut the food. The entire chain that is currently winning this war for CinderCrest starts with eggchan sitting in that castle. Pull eggchan out and the chain runs backwards. Wemmbu leaves angry, the orbital thread flips sides, CinderCrest's momentum breaks, Flame starts questioning his reasons, and Parrot suddenly has a path through a wall that looked completely closed off. Arachnid saw something at that auction that every other faction missed. He understood that eggchan was not just a person, he was a lever, and whoever held the lever held the war. He was completely right. He just never considered the possibility that Parrot would figure out the same thing, walk into the castle, and pull it the other way. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe because that would be mad tough with you. Anyways, bye!